Change can be terrifying. It can also be extremely complex and stressful. But sometimes inside of you, you feel this tug that says it is time to make a change. So you do it. And today I'm going to introduce you guys to several new products that radically redefine everything that you knew about the products that we manufacture. I'm excited to introduce you guys to the next chapter of our company, TA Targets. Before I dive into how you would set up and use the breakdown base, I want to take you guys down a trip on memory lane because I recognize that we have tens of thousands of followers that did not follow us back in 2015 when we first started the company. So a lot has changed over those years that you're probably not aware of. So when I talk about a brand new base or a brand new product, you probably aren't even aware of what led us to that transitionary phase. What data did we gather over that period of time that led us to the decisions that we're making currently? And the reality is the way that I approach product development and releasing products to the market is obviously we come up with the idea, we say, hey, I think we can solve a problem. But then what we do is as we have thousands of units going out into the market, we get feedback not only from our own training, because we are shooters just like you, but you guys give us feedback over those years. There's thousands of you that are running the original 20-inch bases, the Gen 2s, and there's gonna be thousands of you that are running the new breakdown base. So we take all of that data and we say, what can we improve on? I don't wanna be stagnant. I don't wanna be stationary. I want our company to always be pushing the limit and innovating. Now there is an aspect, and I would agree with the statement, that sometimes you just don't change what's good. But I would caution you to never become complacent no matter what you're doing. And I don't want our company and my team to become complacent either. So on my right, on your left, I have the original Gen 1 20-inch base. And technically that's a little bit of a lie because as I'm looking at this one has tapped tubes. Whereas at the very beginning, we drilled holes manually. Like I literally remember being on a drill press and putting holes in these tubes and then tack welding nuts to the outside of the tube, and that was just not nice. That was not a good method of attachment. We ultimately switched to a tap tube like you see here, but the whole ring is made out of one piece of angle that is then rolled, and then we weld in these flat bars that we were cutting out, and then this tube that we were at the time hand sawing and hand drilling and hand tapping. But the whole unit is welded, including the paper holders in the front. And we ran with this generation of base for 5 years, maybe 6 years, until we ultimately made a couple revisions to it. But there's a couple downsides to this base, and I can see one right here. This base has a major dent on the side over here, and this one can no longer be used with a 2x4. So right away, this was one of the strongest bases that has existed on the market. But there's some downsides to the fact that it was fully welded. And that's, you can't maintain it. Once you shoot one of these tubes, unless you're a welder, you can't do anything. I mean, you could try to beat it back out, but we started seeing that over time, more and more customers were having some issues with their tubes and getting their 2x4 posts and also their furring strips into their proper slots. And this is especially true with the paper holders on the front. Because they're welded and because they are at the front of the system, these paper holders get the brunt of the low hits. I know a lot of you are thinking, well, that target system's 4 feet tall. Why are people shooting that low? It's not always people on a pistol range that are shooting that low. Sometimes you're out at, I don't know, 100 yards. Maybe you have a range like ours that's like a long rectangle and you have target systems downrange, and sometimes you train down there. The reality is sometimes your pistol rounds are gonna tumble and go uphill and to your 100-yard berm, and you'll have low impacts. It doesn't matter what you're doing. At some point, someone shoots low and ends up damaging your target base. And because of the design, and because of the costs incurred with manufacturing, there was no way to make this base armored. So for a period of time, we offered an arachnid version of our bases, and that did sell well, but it was extremely expensive and it was extremely cumbersome to manufacture. We ultimately last year ended up phasing out the arachnid base in favor of adjusting our 20-inch base and moving into the Gen 2 of the 20-inch base. Now, the Gen 2 of the 20-inch base is still a welded ring. It still features a welded 2x4 post that is drilled and tapped. The only difference is this is done on an automated machine now. So we've graduated kindergarten and we've moved into middle school, and we upgraded some processes for our manufacturing. This tube was then laser cut, and then that laser actually comes in and drills and taps at the exact same time. The major difference is the paper holders. We knew that because people were constantly having low impact on their paper holders, we needed a way to provide more value to our customers, because the last thing that I want to see is a customer spending money on a base, having a low impact, and then not being able to fix it. Now, we did create a solution for the Gen 1s, and we have them on our site. So if you are a Gen 1 base owner with damaged paper holder tubes, we have a solution for you to have slip fit paper holders behind them. But largely, we knew that we had to innovate. We had to mature a little bit through the brand. So starting at the end of last year, we launched the Gen 2 20-inch round base. And those paper holders are pretty epic. They are a one-piece cut, laser cut and CNC form paper holder. And at the exact same time, one of my other gripes that I had was the fact that it's hard to find furring strips that fit the old tubes perfectly. We had often seen experiences, even with our own range training, where if you left those furring strips in even for a couple weeks, the moisture and everything else would essentially weld them into the tube because the fit was so tight. So when we went to the removable paper holders, we decided to increase that size a little bit so that there was a little bit more wiggle room. And then further, we created our own furring strips to our own custom size that fit down in here even better. And so what that all did was create a better, more refined paper holder system that ultimately is going to serve you longer. It's gonna make your training easier. Less time focused on maintenance, more time focused on training, which is the objective when we're releasing these products. But we knew that the Gen 2 20-inch base wasn't perfect. We knew that there was a change that had to happen. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've been working on this in the background for about 1.5 years. I made the original drawings for the breakdown base about 1.5 years ago. And in that time frame, we have been testing, refining, and completely redefining what it means to have a steel target base. So now I want to talk to you about the brand new breakdown base and why we launched that and why we are moving into this generation of bases. So the base right here is the breakdown base. Now this one is configured in what I'll call kind of a deluxe package. It's not the standard single base, and the only reason why is because we have these aluminum machined pieces in the 2x4 tubes, and we also have a second 2x4 tube in the front up here. You can purchase it in this configuration, but most of you will not need to. When we go back over to the table and I show you how to assemble the breakdown base, we'll talk about it. We'll dive in depth. So I would recommend you stay around here in this video. Don't skip around too much. There's a lot of information for me to share. But right off the bat, you can tell that the breakdown base is very different. My first primary objective of the breakdown base was I wanted every single component to be able to be maintained. What I mean by that is I don't care if you have a low bullet strike on the leg here or the tube or the paper holder or any of the hardware. This was non-negotiable for me. It needed to be able to be replaced because I don't want you guys spending money on an American-made product that you have a low impact and you have to throw it away. One, that's wasteful. I don't like wasting our resources, and metal is a resource that does not have a unlimited supply. So we want to be good stewards of the resources that we have. But at the same time, from an ethical standpoint, I want to make a product that's just not going to fail you. So we created this completely collapsible base that not only is totally maintainable, but it's more elegant than anything else that we've done in the past. And when you see this thing with our target systems, right away, my mind goes, dang, that is a really good looking base. And as our company has matured, we have spent more time on our media. We've spent more time on our photography, more time on our graphics, websites, newsletters. And so naturally, I want our product line to mature with that as well. And I know right away, a lot of you are saying, oh, that looks expensive, but it's not. And that's the best part. Because like I said, we graduated from kindergarten to middle school here. We went straight from middle school right to the university, and we graduated with a master's degree in manufacturing with this particular base. Everything on this base is fiber laser cut, CNC formed to exacting tolerances. And what that means is whether you buy one base or 100, they are all identical. How they go together is identical. How they work is identical. You buy furring strips from us, they're going to fit into the paper holder tube every single time. The spacing of everything is going to be the same every single time. And it is that attention to detail that led us to what I would say is the best base that we have ever created. And so the question you're gonna have right now is, okay, cool, Jared, but is that base replacing everything? And the answer is yes. This base is replacing every other base that we have in our lineup. The only difference is there's accessories that are coming, and they're gonna be launched in the coming months, that attach to this base, that replace our double base, that replace our 26-inch base, and move us into another generation of steel target systems. So don't be surprised if you see us closing out some of those other products and moving into more content teaching you about the breakdown base. And that's the last thing I kind of want to close this video out with. This is a forward-thinking design. And what I mean by that is we have thought forward for many years to say, okay, what needs to be available for this base? And because of the way that we designed it, the way we framed everything off of that maintainable system, we are able to offer even more systems that are going to help you out with your training for years to come. And it's that attention to detail that is setting us apart from everybody else. And I hope that just looking at this, looking at the transition from what feels like a caveman era up to this high-tech base designed to work with almost all of our systems, that you can see that this is a company that is not only devoted to culture like you guys know, but we are devoted to creating epic steel target systems that serve you for the long haul. So the last little point I want to go over with this base as we're going over the why is what systems is this thing going to work with? So in the configuration you see here and the one that we're going over up at the table in a couple seconds, this base currently replaces the 20-inch round base for our mini ADAP system, mini vital system, our C-zone ADAP system, as well as our vital zone system and our falling tree. More information is going to be coming soon about the double falling tree, the dueling tree, the Phoenix, and the Mod 1 bullet trap. So stay tuned for other content where we're going to dive into all of that. But sitting here talking about this base doesn't really paint the full picture of how much versatility is offered in this base. So I want to show you guys how you build the system, and also I want to speak to how transportable the breakdown base is. Let's get into that. One of the first things that you're going to notice when you start analyzing the breakdown base is the fact that it is far more compact and far more portable than the old Gen 1 and Gen 2 welded bases. And that was a primary design feature and an objective of this transition to the breakdown base that I know that we nailed because of the form factor of this base. I have two different variations here on the table that I want to go over with you, and then I'm going to break down the one on my left to show you how you would set up your breakdown base. But before I do that, you are going to notice that inside of this one on my left, we have a top bracket bolted in here, and it works as a perfect handle, and that is a side benefit of the breakdown base. You don't have to purchase it with the top bracket or with a complete system, but when you purchase it with a complete system, you can bolt the top bracket that's included into your base to keep it safe and secure and exactly where you need it all the time, so you can just focus more time on training. And when I hold up the Gen 5 top bracket, you can tell right away that it is very different than the previous version. The most obvious difference between the two is the fact that this one has no welds. This is made out of 2 pieces of steel, and then it is bolted together with 4 small carriage bolts. And this design is advantageous because of the fact that you can unbolt it from your wooden post. So if you're like me and you have your range set up and you just leave your targets out year round, this new top bracket allows you to unbolt it if those boards swell, so you'll never have a stuck top bracket on your boards again. Now, this video is not about the top bracket. I love this top bracket so much that we made another video specifically on this. So if you want to check out that video, you want to learn more about this product, we're going to put a card over my head and we'll put a link down in the description. You guys should definitely check that out because this is a complete transition to this new top bracket. When it comes to setting up the breakdown base, it's extremely simple. There are some things that you're going to need. However, we designed it in a way that you don't need an extensive knowledge of tools or maintenance or mechanical ability in order to do it. But largely, the only things you have to remove to separate the halves are the nylon lock nuts. So for the essence of time, I'm going to be using a 14 millimeter 9/16 deep socket, but included with every single breakdown base is one of our breakdown base tools. And this tool has a couple different features. It has the hex female insert here that does fit over these nylon locking nuts. So it is designed to work sort of as a wrench. Then we also have a slot here that I'll talk about in depth a little later, but this is specifically for your thumb screws because sometimes those thumb screws can get extremely finicky, especially if they've been on the range in rain and water for months on end. It can be difficult to get them out. This tool gives you a little bit of leverage instead of just using your fingers. And then the square part right here on the end is for a 3/8 inch drive ratchet. So if you have something that's stubborn and you need to get it out, you can use a ratchet to get some extra torque on this tool. And then we have a bottle opener for your favorite flavor of energy drink on the range. That's just another little side benefit. These are laser cut. They're included with every hardware kit for the breakdown base. They're included with every breakdown base. So let's pop off these nylon lock nuts over here. We're gonna first remove the 8-AP top bracket. One thing to keep in mind as you guys are putting your 8-AP top bracket into your breakdown base, never over tighten these 2 bolts right here, because what'll happen is you'll squeeze on the top bracket, and I actually did it a little bit to this one. You'll squeeze on it and you'll remove some of the bend of that top bracket. It's not gonna necessarily hurt the performance of the top bracket, but it's not the best for it because you're gonna actually deform it a little bit. So just keep that in mind. We're gonna then remove the 2 lock nuts up here. The reason we used lock nuts is because we don't want these things working loose through the vibrations and the impacts from the steel targets. And even if you're just shooting cardboard, it's still important to have a locking nut. It's just gonna keep everything more snug and more secure. Now we can separate the halves. So we'll pull that 8-AP top bracket out. Again, it's a top bracket just like the other one that I have on the table. So what you're gonna be left with after you separate your breakdown base is you have a single 2x4 tube, and that single 2x4 tube looks just like this. Again, it's laser cut, CNC formed out of 1 piece of steel. So this is an extremely elegant way to mount a 2x4. We have 3 tapped holes. You've got 1 on the front, 1 on the rear, and then 1 on the side. In typical configuration, the 1 on the side is the shorter thumb screw. That is with 2x4 posts or our custom wood post. If you're running our armored post, you would actually put the longer one, the 1.5 inch, on the side, and you would put the short one on the rear. And that's just due to the design of the armored post. But the bottom of this tube has holes on both sides, and that's what the carriage bolts will go through. One thing to note, because we have holes on both of the skinny sides, it doesn't matter which orientation you put this tube when you bolt your breakdown base together. You just want to make sure that the thumb screw is always in the rear. You don't want your thumb screw in the front. I'm going to set that off to the side for a second. Next thing we're going to do is take off the paper holders. Now these are super convenient. They are 3/8 inch wing nuts. There's a washer and then a tiny little carriage bolt. So we'll set those there, set the paper holder off to the side. We're gonna take off this last paper holder. Now, if you ordered a top bracket with your base, you have an extra set of 2 carriage bolts. You're not gonna need these extra carriage bolts and the lock nuts for them to properly assemble your breakdown base. Just make sure that you don't lose them. So the first thing that I like to do is set both of the leg halves in front of me. The base legs are ambidextrous, and what I mean by that is there's no left and right. You can interchange them, it doesn't matter. That makes it easy for you. You just set them on the ground, line them up like that. You grab your 2x4 tube. Again, doesn't matter which way you put it, but because I have the thumb screw in the rear, I'm letting that go to the rear. You line everything up like that. Grab your carriage bolts. Again, doesn't matter which direction you go. Slide them through both halves. Grab your lock nuts. You'll install those lock nuts. I'm gonna, again, for time, use my ratchet. You could use the included tool. It works perfectly fine. That way, if you ever forget your tools, all you gotta do is remember that little tool and you'll be set. When it comes to the torque amount on these bolts, you don't have to go crazy. I don't recommend going nuts. I would recommend that you make them snug. I don't know, I'm probably putting about 15, 20 foot-pounds on those. Doesn't have to be crazy. If you want a more permanent base and you're not planning on breaking it down and transporting it like this one over here, you could actually blue Loctite these lock nuts as well. The next step is going to be the paper holders. There is a left and a right. So when we're looking at this base, this is the direction that they're going to go. If I would flip them, you'll notice they're looking kind of wonky over here. They don't look quite right. I mean, you could use them like that for larger paper, but they're not square. They're not facing quite the right direction. So this one over here is my right. This one over here is my left. I'm going to take the little carriage bolts, put them in from the bottom. We use carriage bolts and wing nuts on these, so you don't need any tools to install your paper holders. Then I'm simply going to put the washers, and I'm going to put the flat side of the washer down. Again, these do not require a ton of torque. You just tighten them down by hand. And we will install the next set of carriage bolts over here. Now that the paper holders are on, you have a base that's ready to shoot. You could use either a 2x4 post, our custom wood post, or our armored post. You would insert that into the tube here, and you would be able to rock any of our steel target systems with the ADAP top bracket. Or if you're more into shooting cardboard, you would simply grab furring strips and you would install them into the paper holders, one into each, and then you would staple your favorite cardboard target onto the furring strips. And we have those available on the website as well. One of the questions I know people are going to ask is, do I have to install the paper holders? The answer is no, you don't have to. If you're just going to shoot steel, you can leave those off. They're not going to provide you really any value if all you're doing is shooting steel targets, but they are there as an option that comes standard with the breakdown base so that you can shoot cardboard or paper or shoot them together. I know it sounds crazy, but it's something that you can use for your training. It is going to provide you a lot of value. In this particular configuration, this base is suitable for our Mini ADAP system, Mini Vital, Vital Zone, and C-Zone target systems. There are some nuances with the falling tree, and with the falling tree, we actually send this base with a second tube that goes in the front to avoid any flexing of the base. It's just a stiffener. But there's also some other side benefits to that. And I talked briefly over there on the ground of sort of a deluxe breakdown base setup. And I'm gonna show you guys what that would look like. But to do that, you would have to purchase a second 2x4 tube and you would install it up in the front. So what I'm gonna do to actually be able to fit that in there is we're gonna loosen up the locking nuts over here. Now that the tube's loose, it's gonna give me just enough wiggle room right here to fit the other 2x4 tube in. We're gonna slide that in, grab the extra carriage bolts that came with your top bracket, slide that in just like we did with the other tube. This is exactly the same process. We're gonna install the lock nuts and we're gonna retighten both sets of lock nuts. Again, we're gonna just be careful. We don't need to over torque these. You don't have to go crazy. But in this configuration, what this second tube is doing is stiffening the front of the base. It's tying everything together and eliminating any possibility of flexing. And the only time you really have to do that is if you have our falling tree target, because you've got a paddle that's slamming side to side and you can rock the base. It doesn't make it unstable, but you can have inconsistent reactivity with that paddle. So we have that as an option that you purchase separately if you want it for any of our systems, or you would get it with the falling tree if you bought that target system as a set. But there's another side benefit that I wanted to talk about having both of the 2x4 tubes in the bottom. We machine and manufacture these inserts that are pretty epic, and I like these a lot, and I'm gonna explain why. These machined aluminum inserts just simply slide into the 2x4 tubes on the breakdown base, and this is where the magic happens. Our custom furring strips that we manufacture slide right down into those holes. So you might be asking yourself, well, Jared, you just said I have paper holders on the base, and you can see it, they're right there. There's paper holders on the front, and now I've got two tubes that can act as paper holders. Why would you want to do that? Well, the simple answer is when you have the base turned sideways and you have cardboard inserted this way, you now have a leg to the front and a leg to the rear. And what that means is in high wind conditions, this is the more stable option than simply having cardboard furring strips in the front. The front is great if wind is coming from the front and pushing back. This base is not gonna fold over and flip backwards. But if you have extremely high gusts of wind going forward, you can sometimes see bases, even ones like ours, lifting up, and you can eventually have a base flip over onto the cardboard, which isn't the end of the world. But if you're in the middle of training a bunch of people, or you're on the range training yourself, it's just not convenient. So the last little detail that I wanted to cover about this base is I'm talking about stability and positioning your cardboard targets in windy environments. If you don't want to purchase the machined aluminum inserts for the 2x4 tubes, the other option that you have on our website is you can buy a set of 4 of our stakes. We burn these out. They're super inexpensive. They're super easy to use. They are typically sold with our popper system, but on the back of the breakdown base and on the front, there's a total of 4 holes that allow these stakes to go down into. So in that example where I said, if you have wind coming from the back, pushing on your cardboard target and it's becoming unstable, I would just recommend putting 2 stakes in the back, and that's gonna solve your problem. So just kind of closing out the how-to of this base, there's very little maintenance that's gonna need to happen. If you wanna touch up the paint over time, it will chip from fragmentation from steel targets. We do have touch-up kits on our website as well. But other than that, just keep all of the hardware tight. And inside of our user manual, we cover all of that in depth. Definitely read the user manual before you just take out the breakdown base and use it on the range. But talking about this thing just isn't quite as exciting as hitting the range and shooting. So what we're gonna do is do what I needed to do for months, and that's get back into more and more training, focusing on my firearm fundamentals, and also enjoying this radical new base. .74. Let's go down range and talk about the breakdown base real quick. My hope is that through this video, you guys have learned a little bit about the breakdown base, that maybe we've painted the picture as to why we have made the change away from the Gen 2 base and into this new, very elegant base that is extremely versatile, more portable than anything else that we've had on the market to date. And it's gonna offer you guys a lot more value over the long run than any of the bases of the past. And that's not saying that the bases of the past are bad. It's just saying that we have analyzed where we have come from. We've applied the things that we've learned, and ultimately what that means is for all of you buying more systems and the new customers that we have every single year, you guys are getting more and more increased value as you purchase these products and you hit the range and train, because we know that you are all committed to becoming better protectors of your family, your tribe, your community, your property, everybody that you love. And we are honored to be a small part of that. So if this video was helpful to you, please let us know in the comment section. We're gonna put links down in the description that will point you to the website and take you to all of the different product pages. And just stay tuned, because we do have more variations of bases, more accessories and things like that coming in the very near future. But it's getting late, it's time for me to clean up. We're gonna pack this base up, head home for the night, and I will catch you guys in the next one.